We're up now to carnivore panel number 2. And our first presenter is Story Warren with the Humane Society of the United States. And she's going to talk about protecting Oregon's carnivores, ending wildlife killing contests, and restoring responsibility in wolf country. Thank you, Story.
Hello, everyone. My name is Story Warren. I'm a Wildlife Protection Program Manager at the Humane Society of the United States. And like Susan said, I'm going to be talking about protecting Oregon's carnivores through ending wildlife killing contests and recreating responsibly in wolf country. So first, we'll talk about ending wildlife killing contests in Oregon. We'll talk about what they are, their status here in our state, and some progress toward ending them. Then we will switch gears quite a bit to recreating responsibly in wolf country. We'll talk about wolf behavior and what to expect during an encounter, and some do's and don'ts for living, working, and playing in wolf country. So just to warn everyone, these next 2 slides have some pretty disturbing images. So what are wildlife killing contests? Unfortunately, they're just what they sound like. They are contests where participants go out and kill as many animals as they can, usually in a 24 to 48 hour period. Usually the species targeted in these contests are coyotes, foxes, bobcats, sometimes even wolves and mountain lions. And they compete for who kills the most, or sometimes who can kill the heaviest or even the smallest animal. And they are marketed as a family-friendly event that includes children. So unfortunately, killing contests are still very much alive here in Oregon. Between 2018 and 2022, over 1,000 coyotes were killed in killing contests in Oregon. HSUS estimates that nationwide, that number is between 36,000 and 110,000 animals killed per year in killing contests. So in late 2018, HSUS investigators went undercover to one killing contest weigh-in Hines in Harney County. It was called the Young Farmers and Ranchers First Annual Coyote Hunt. It was sponsored by the Oregon Farm Bureau, with participants competing for cash prizes for killing the heaviest coyotes. And this is one disturbing image from that event. And that's the end of the disturbing images. So killing contests, of course, remove vital species from the landscape. Biologists have condemned these practices as not an effective way to reduce coyote populations. It's similar to what you heard from Dr. Wielgus earlier. Predator ecology is very similar across species. If you just go out and randomly mass kill coyotes, it's not actually going to reduce their population over the long term. It is going to increase immigration of younger animals, taking over what were previously stable family territories. And of course, carnivores, mesocarnivores like coyotes, bobcats, foxes are very important in their ecosystems for rodent control and general increasing of biodiversity. So beyond being ecologically destructive, I think most people in this room would agree that they are ethically indefensible. Wildlife managers are starting to catch on to this as public awareness of killing contests increases and public opposition to killing contests. Wildlife managers worry that it tarnishes the reputation of more responsible hunters and potentially threatens the future of public support for hunting altogether. Former chair of the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission, Mike Finley, who is himself a hunter, said this about killing contests. Killing large numbers of predators as part of an organized contest is inconsistent with science-based wildlife management and antithetical to the concepts of sportsmanship and fair chase. So 8 states have banned killing contests in recent years, which is great news. Our goal is to ban them state by state. Those listed in green there banned killing contests through their state fish and wildlife commissions, and those in gray banned them through their state legislatures. So some progress toward ending killing contests in Oregon. So in 2019, the investigation of that killing contest in Hines broke. A bill was introduced to ban killing contests. It passed the Senate. However, Senate Republicans walked out twice, and they left the state over climate and gun and other unrelated bills. And the coyote killing contest bill was one of the casualties in those negotiations to bring them back. Very similar series of events played out in 2020, including the walkout. In 2021, the bill passed the House, but it failed to receive a hearing in the Senate due to some backroom politicking. It should be noted that in 2020, the sponsor of this bill was Representative Brad Witt, who was then co-chair of the Oregon Legislative Sportsman Caucus. So that shows again that even among hunters, there is opposition against killing contests. So in 2022, the campaign against killing contests switched gears to the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission. 15 groups, including the HSUS and some of the groups represented here today, petitioned the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission to develop rules to end coyote killing contests in Oregon. So here's where it gets tricky. In Oregon, coyotes are classified as predatory animals, and state statute dictates that the Fish and Wildlife Commission doesn't have the authority to limit any of the killing of predatory animals. So technically, they had to reject our petition. However, they voted nearly unanimously, 6-1, to direct ODFW to work with the Department of Justice within their legal framework to develop rules to end coyote killing contests in Oregon, which is really awesome news. So what's next? There is a Fish and Wildlife Commission meeting scheduled for September 15th in Bend. It would be awesome if we could pack the house with conservationists who support this ending of coyote killing contests. There will also be a written public comment opening later this summer. If you want to send an email to oregon@humanesociety.org, we can keep you up to date and notify you of how you can help us finally get this across the finish line in Oregon. So switching gears a bit to recreating responsibly in wolf country. It's a super exciting time to be living in Central Oregon for those who live here, where rewilding is happening as we speak right here around Camp Sherman as wolves are coming back and people have the chance of seeing or hearing a wild wolf right here in our backyards. I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time in wolf country, both on my own time and for work. As an undergraduate, I had several seasonal positions where it was my job to go out and find wolves, including in Montana, and an internship with the ODFW wolf program in 2019, where it was my job to get in my work truck and go out into the woods alone for days at a time to find new wolf packs and monitor existing packs. So it's a great time to talk about some misconceptions about wolf interactions with humans and some best practices in wolf country. So in our media, there are lots of very scary depictions of wolves. They're usually depicted as villains or man-eaters, whether it's Little Red Riding Hood or more recent movies like Frozen and The Grey. So there are a lot of misconceptions. As wolves come back into a new area, there can be a lot of fear and concern. So should people be afraid of wolves? In short, no. There have been only 6 wolf attacks on humans in the entire continent of North America over the last 20 years. None of those were in the western lower 48 states. There hasn't been a single wolf attack on a human in all the western lower 48 states since wolves started coming back into Montana in the 80s and then reintroduction in the 90s. So that's thousands of wolves, millions of people using the same landscapes for decades without incident. The incidents that happened in other parts of the continent usually involved habituated wolves, or not usually, but often, that had lost their fear of humans due to being fed directly or finding food near campgrounds, campsites, or dumps. And so that number, 6 attacks, is much lower than that of cougars or bears, which are both, those are also very rare animal attacks on humans, but it just kind of puts in perspective that wolves, there's no reason to be more afraid of wolves. So wolves are elusive and they tend to avoid us. They really don't want anything to do with us. If you see a wolf in the wild, it might be a once in a lifetime moment, which is pretty exciting. That being said, while they are elusive, they can utilize habitat very close to people, including near popular trails or busy roads or near rural neighborhoods, just like bears and cougars sometimes do. So this next video is from an encounter that I had when I was working for ODFW, and I happened to be able to get this encounter on film, which is pretty difficult because usually encounters last so quickly that you can't really get a video. And I showed my bosses and they thought that it would be a good educational tool. So this next video shows what a typical wolf encounter will look like. In places like Yellowstone, where wolves are more used to seeing people every day, it might not go this way, but in the Pacific Northwest, this is usually how it will go. Hopefully this will work. While working as an ODFW summer intern, I had an exciting encounter with a wolf. I was alone, surveying an area for signs of wolf activity, when I saw a wolf walk out of the forest. As the wolf moved in my direction, it was clear that it didn't know that I was there. As it got closer, I said something quietly to alert the wolf. As soon as I did, the wolf stopped in its tracks, trying to figure out what made the noise. It turned and ran as soon as it realized I was there. Running away is a wolf's typical reaction to encountering a human. There are a few other behaviors I could have seen during this encounter. Sometimes wolves will bark howl when they feel nervous or threatened. Pretty crazy sound. They might also follow a person at a distance until they are out of the area that the wolves feel protective of, like a den or feeding site. These bolder behaviors become more likely if there is a dog present, since wolves see dogs as intruders in their territory. Okay, so one reason why that video was so relevant to publish is, unfortunately, almost every year you'll hear stories about wolves charging people or stalking people or surrounding people. And often if you read these articles, it's during hunting seasons when folks are dressed in camo and they're imitating animal calls and they're crouched in the bushes. But people are so conditioned to fear wolves that any wolf moving in their direction seems pretty scary. So unfortunately, several wolves have been shot in Washington and Oregon and other states by people who felt threatened that they were moving in their direction. But a lot of those incidents, the wolf probably didn't even know that a human was sitting there in the bushes. So if a wolf is moving in your direction, make sure it knows you're there. Just stand up, wave your arms, say something. Usually it'll start heading in the other direction. And if you hunt, or if you know anybody who hunts, that's a good message to pass along as wolves are coming back into Central Oregon. And just to add to that video, one reason why she didn't know that I was standing there is the breeze was blowing my scent away from her. I think everyone's pretty familiar that wolves have excellent sense of smell, but they can't beat the wind. So if a wolf is upwind of you, that's another reason why they might not know that you're there. So there are some vulnerable locations for wolf families that we should be aware of. They might be more protective of these places. In early spring, wolf pups are born in dens. They're born around the same time every year, so right now most wolf pups are between about 2 and 4 weeks old. When they're a little bit older, they'll be moved to rendezvous sites, which are safe places where the adults kind of stash the pups while they go out to hunt. I say stash, but the pups can roam a fairly big area. There are also these feeding areas, carcasses of deer, elk, or moose that the wolves are eating. So one way you can avoid going into these vulnerable locations is keeping an eye out for animal sign. If you're seeing a lot of wolf tracks or scat, you might be getting close to one of these areas, and it's best to head on out. If wolves are disturbed in these sensitive areas, they might move their pups. You might also be more likely to hear that bark howling or repeated howling, or a wolf might not run away right away, or they might escort you. And that, again, if you see that behavior, it's best to calmly leave the area, and especially keep dogs leashed and under control. So wolves can also be curious, especially the pups, which can be a little bit dumb, just like dog pups. So if a wolf does approach you, it's best to discourage that behavior by acting loud and scary and then calmly leaving the area. A wolf that loses its fear of humans is unfortunately more likely to be illegally shot or hit by a car. And of course, never feed or approach wildlife. So some do's and don'ts in wolf country. Keep dogs leashed and under control. This is probably the most important one. Wolf attacks on dogs are very uncommon, but they do see dogs as intruders. So just to keep your dog safe and keep wildlife safe, it's best to keep them leashed. If you live in wolf country, it's best not to let your dogs roam unsupervised, especially at night. I always take my dog out leashed to do her business at night. It's a little bit inconvenient, but well worth her safety and the safety of wildlife. Be aware of your surroundings and conditions, things like wind direction and animal sign. Keep food and garbage secure from wildlife, just like you would or do from bears. Carry bear spray and know how to use it. And some don'ts: feed or approach wildlife, of course, and don't seek out vulnerable wolf areas. So for those who aren't familiar, this is what bear spray looks like. It's important to keep it accessible on your person. I keep it clipped to a belt loop at my side. They make chest holsters too. I recommend Googling how to properly deploy bear spray, because it is pretty essential that you do it properly. Yeah. So I always carry bear spray, though in all of my time hiking and camping alone in wolf and cougar and bear country, and despite having quite a few close encounters, I've never felt threatened by wildlife. I've never had to use the bear spray, but it is a very effective deterrent in the very, very slim chance that any animal becomes aggressive. So in the extremely unlikely event that a wolf acts aggressively, don't run, shout, make yourself look bigger, wave your arms, throw objects toward the wolf if you need to. If it continues to act aggressively, deploy bear spray correctly and fight back with any tools you have if you are attacked. But the take-home message here is that having wolves back in the woods doesn't make it any more dangerous than it was with cougars and bears. It's honestly just super exciting that wolves are coming back to Central Oregon. And there are some common sense steps like leashing dogs, being aware of your surroundings, carrying bear spray, and being familiar with animal behavior that help us share the landscape with all wildlife. And these are some pictures from ODFW of some of our local Central Oregon wolves, and you'll hear more about them during Jenny's presentation. Thank you.